At those same November 16, 2011 proceedings, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Regional Chief of the BC Assembly of First Nations, who in July 2014 was nominated the Liberal Party of Canada candidate for the new riding of Vancouver-Granville for the 2015 federal election, chipped in to also respond to Senator Sibiston's question. Quote, "I will add on to Chief Louis' comments. Thank you for the question. To be forthright, among a lot of First Nations in this country, there is still a fear of change, a fear of moving beyond the status quo." Jody Wilson-Raybould is married to Dr. Tim Raybould, who was conducting his University of Cambridge, England, doctoral research on Aboriginal self-government in the field at Westbank Indian Band when I was there. Not clear as to his role, he summarized it to me as his being a handler. Later, he was, quote, responsible for the Westbank First Nation Self-Government Agreement, the first under Canada's Aboriginal self-government policy. He has provided advice to the LAB, the National Centre for First Nations Governance, and teaches at Banff Centre. Curious about their programs, an upcoming offering at the Banff Centre is Inherent Right to Indigenous Governance. This was January 24 to 29th, 2016. Revitalizing Indigenous Nationhood Series Program Overview. Aboriginal nations and organizations are at various stages in exercising local sovereignty. The Supreme Court of Canada in the Vanderpeet case stated that the sovereignty of Aboriginal societies must be reconciled with Crown sovereignty. You will come away from the program with an understanding of what a reconciled model of governance would look like after exploring and discussing traditional forms of Aboriginal governance, while gaining a fuller understanding of the colonial forms of governance. Successful self-governance begins with a complete understanding of the constitutional and legal framework regarding the various levels of governments. Learn from an Aboriginal case study implementing their self-government agreement. The title is completely misleading given the program description. Local, as a qualifier to sovereignty, is referencing municipal governance, and note the absence of the term Indigenous sovereignty, despite the title hook including Indigenous governance. Instead, the reference is to Aboriginal governance. And note, Aboriginal organizations do not have any sovereignty. As discussed below, where established under federal or provincial laws, they are mere artificial creatures of those laws. Implementing a self-government agreement through federal legislation pursuant to a federal policy is not the same thing as engaging in governance as a continuing exercise and use of Indigenous sovereignty at the local Indigenous community level. This model being taught is clearly a federal municipal model. That is consistent with the definition of a reconciled model of governance that results in, if every Indigenous community follows suit, only one sovereign, the Crown. The Catholic sacrament of reconciliation has three elements: conversion, confession, and celebration, resulting on being reconciled to the community of the Church disciples. This is not revitalizing Indigenous governance. This is termination of Indigenous governance and establishing a Canadian federal municipality discipled by an agreement made under a federal policy. Reconciliation can also be defined as the process of finding a way to make two different ideas, facts, etc., exist or be true at the same time. The treaties are the acts of reconciliation. Continuing Indigenous nations, continuing in their long-standing constitutions and laws, on and over their lands and people, permitting the Crown to exercise her sovereignty subject to the treaties. Two sovereignties coexisting, nation to nation. Two facts existing and being true at the same time. The natures of these two sovereignties differ. One is vested in a sole monarch, the other is not, as do their exercises of sovereignty. An effort to destroy that is a crime against peace. That is a huge subject for another time, but this summary assists for present purposes. A crime against peace in international law refers to planning, preparation, initiation, or waging of wars of aggression, or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements, or assurances, or participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of any of the foregoing. This definition of crimes against peace was first incorporated into the Nuremberg Principles and later included in the United Nations Charter. This definition would play a part in defining aggression as a crime against peace. It can also refer to the core international crimes set out in Rome's Statute of the International Criminal Court: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression, which adopted crimes were negotiated previously in the draft Code of Crimes against the peace and security of mankind. In various earlier writings, I have referred to continuing efforts against Indigenous nations as being a Cold War, which is defined as a state of political hostility between countries characterized by threats, propaganda, and other measures short of open warfare. This is why it is essential for certain opt-in post-Indian Act initiatives to be seen to have been dreamed up and requested by the Indigenous side. Structured as something proposed to the Crown's governments, and the Crown governments then accepting that proposal. They result in a destruction of that actual, internationally lawful reconciliation, treaties, in the guise of a domestic reconciliation with the aim of destruction of the existing reconciliation. Come closer. I have just what you want. Here's a great idea, don't you think? Here, let me help you get some funding to pursue that idea. V. John Raybould was a founding member of the Fraser Institute in 1974. Another person involved in these very early deliberations was John Raybould, who would subsequently also join the Institute. Raybould had had an interesting career working in private industry and as a sometime lecturer in history and city architecture at the University of British Columbia. His eclectic interests included a deep knowledge of British history and the developments which had followed the emergence in Britain of the sort of economic policies which were then contemplated by many Canadian governments. They were joined in this activity by Sally Pipes, who had worked in the government of British Columbia's Statistical Agency and for the Council of Federal Industries of British Columbia. In September of 1974, T. Patrick Boyle, a senior industrial executive with worldwide experience and then vice president financial planning at Macmillan Bloedel, Hadju, Raybould, Pipes, and Walker. In Ottawa, Michael Walker was working as an in-house consultant with the Department of Finance and having just come from a 4-year stint at the Bank of Canada, began the process of developing the Fraser Institute mission statement and operating plan. The Fraser Institute obtained charitable status in Canada on October 22, 1974, and in the United States in 1978. Sir Anthony Fisher, previously instrumental in setting up the UK's Institute of Economic Affairs, was appointed acting director in 1975 until Walker became executive director in 1977. In its first year of operation, 1975, the Institute reported revenues of $421,389. V. John Raybould is the former publications advisor of the Fraser Institute. Born in London, England in 1939, he graduated in Honours History in 1961 from University College London and has pursued graduate studies at the University of London and the University of British Columbia. John's wide-ranging experience in economic research includes a stint as Economic Intelligence Officer with the British Mechanical Engineering Federation, Research Director of the Employers' Council of British Columbia, and Social Economic Studies Administrator, British Columbia Telephone Company. John initiated the semi-annual Business Trends Survey, now published by the BC Employers' Council, and has published a number of research studies relating to the BC economy. A past president of the Association of Professional Economists of British Columbia, Mr. Raybould has also been treasurer of the BC division of the Community Planning Association of Canada. This is from the Fraser Institute's website. The Fraser Institute's annual reports include economic freedom. The Institute is well known for its annual Economic Freedom of the World Index, which ranks the countries of the world according to their degrees of economic freedom. The Institute has also published regional and subnational reports ranking the economic freedom of North America, Latin America, the Arab world, and the Francophonie. These reports are distributed worldwide through the Economic Freedom Network, a global network of 80 think tanks. Survey of mining companies, investment climates of mining jurisdictions around the world, based on the opinions of mining industry executives and managers. Global Petroleum Survey, an annual survey of petroleum executives regarding barriers to investment in oil and gas producing regions around the world. Canadian Provincial Investment Climate, a series of reports measuring the extent to which Canadian provinces embrace public policies that contribute to and sustain positive investment climates. In 1981, that same year saw the departure of one of the Fraser Institute's original staff members, John Raybould, who had served as publications manager and as the first director of the Economic Education Resource Centre, left for the Institute of Economic Affairs in London, England. In 1979, when V. John Raybould was publications manager, the Fraser Institute is described as follows. The Fraser Institute is an independent Canadian economic and social research and educational organization. It has as its objective the redirection of public attention to the role of competitive markets in providing for the well-being of Canadians. Where markets work, the Institute's interest lies in trying to discover prospects for improvement. Where markets do not work, its interest lies in finding the reasons. Markets have not worked optimally in BC because of the lack of treaties with Indigenous nations. So the conversion effort has been underway. The establishment of certainty of Crown ownership favorably drives markets in BC. The latest piece in helping this along came out in 2014. V. John Raybould of Westbank, BC, is a secondary contributor to the Government Toolkit, a Guide to Nation Building, Part 1, Second Edition, the Governance Report. British Columbia Assembly of First Nations, 2014, also known as BCAFN Governance Toolkit, written by Jody Wilson Raybould and Tim Raybould. A peer review participant is Chief Robert Louis. Jody Wilson Raybould describes the BCAFN Governance Toolkit in the letter from Regional Chief Jody Wilson Raybould, BCAFN Governance Toolkit, that introduces it as helping nations shed the Indian Act, emphasizing that BC Indian bands are the leaders for the governance initiatives in Canada. She is singing the same tune she did with Senator Sibitston. After more than a century of living under the Indian Act, it may be difficult for some nations to shed the routine of colonialism and tackle the seemingly overwhelming task of nation building or nation rebuilding. For some, the status quo works and unfortunately serves their self-interest. For others, it may be hard to shed the old ways. Many more will simply be afraid of change, preferring to live with the devil they know rather than with the one they do not. A bullying approach to the opt-in initiatives disturbs me. This, if you are not on board the FNLMA regime, you are either too chicken or too self-serving and are comfortable wallowing in the Indian Act. You are weak, scared, not bold, because you are not doing it this way. So what are you? What do you want to be? What, instead of who, is a deliberate choice of word. A poor, ignorant bush Indian stuck in the past, or a sophisticated, rich, tie-wearing Canadian carrying a briefcase to greet the future. Where have those people even been? Today, most of the extremely successful business people do not wear suits and carry briefcases. They wear jeans and black turtlenecks or gray t-shirts and hoodies and wear laptop bags while on their longboards. They are out to change the world in their way, not in the way of their great-grandfather's generation. They are digital natives. They speak the digital language of computers, videos, video games, smartphones, apps, and social media.